The essence of my talks that I've been giving over the last few years are largely based on what it was that made Matt Damon decide to play me in a Hollywood film. The story began in 2004, if we could have the first slide. My life was absolutely idyllic. I was living in the south of France with my 2 children and my lovely wife. I was writing a book about animal intelligence and a column on DIY for the Guardian newspaper. It was a fantastic time. And, sorry, could we have the next slide, please? There was plenty of DIY to be done to fill my column because I was building a wooden house in the back of an empty barn for us to live in. So every time I hit my thumb with a hammer, I could write 400 words and make a joke about it in the papers and get paid for it. The mood changed a little bit. In 2005, my father died, and my mother was going to sell the large house that we'd all grown up in Surrey and buy a little cottage and give some money to her siblings and live on her own. We thought this was a very sad development, so we decided to look for a large house that she could live in with 1 or more members of her family and some grandchildren. Eventually, this house came up, which looked ideal. It was very run down indeed. It had 13 bedrooms, set in 30 acres of lovely countryside in Devon, and it looked like it was going to be the place for us. And we turned over the page and the estate agent's details, and we saw it also had 7 Siberian tigers, 3 African lions. Can we scroll through some of the animal pictures? 3 European brown bears, a pack of wolves, and this guy, Sovereign the Jaguar, who is probably the most dangerous animal on the park. All our friends laughed at us and said, "Don't be insane, nobody in their right minds would buy a zoo, you'd have to be really crazy for animals and really interested in doing a lot of DIY. And I thought, well, hang on, we are a bit like that. Let's just go and have a look at the place to rule it out, which was, of course, a huge mistake, because you turn up and you think, well, you could probably turn this around. And you look in the eyes of the animals and we realise that many of them, probably more than half, would have been destroyed if someone doesn't step in and buy this closed-down zoo. But 6 months later, in the beginning, towards the end of 2006, we moved to Devon in England, from the driest and hottest region of southern France to the wettest and coldest part of England, actually, as it happens. On our 4th day, we got a real shock about what running a zoo can entail. One of the big cats escaped. My brother came running into the house, shouting, "One of the big cats is out! This is not a drill!" And then ran out again. And I thought, well, that's very strange, because he doesn't normally talk like that at all. I went out to the sound of roaring and screaming, and I was sure that I was going to find someone being eaten alive by a big cat. And all the voices of all the people who told me, do not do this, suddenly I'm thinking, actually, maybe they had a bit of a point. 4 days ago as a journalist, I didn't have to deal with this kind of stuff. But we ended up, the escape was subsequently immortalised in the Hollywood movie We Bought a Zoo, where they used a much safer animal, which is a bear. It didn't go down like that at all. We're very, very lucky that the jaguar, who had been let out by keeper error, didn't pause to kill the keeper, who, whilst cleaning out the house, had forgotten to lock the door. So as he's sweeping up, can we just go to the next slide, please? He saw this, as the jaguar pushed the door up, came in through the house, and didn't pause to kill him. Ran down the path instead, completely free, in the middle of the zoo, where he could have run on to Dartmoor, where he'd still be today, or gone down into the pub and eaten all the people down there, or indeed stayed on the picnic area and picnicked on my children. But no, he had part of an 8-year plan, which was to fight the 3 tigers in the enclosure opposite. So luckily he jumped across the moat. I think we have a picture. Yes, can we go to the next slide? He jumped across the moat into this enclosure and started his mission of fighting the tigers. This is a very long and extremely fraught story, where I had a very quick baptism of fire into the real perils and responsibilities of looking after so many extremely dangerous predators. Our first Christmas at the zoo in 2006, my wife received some extremely bad news. Well, we all did. A brain tumour that she had diagnosed in 2004 when we were living in France had returned. This is my wife Catherine in France, undergoing her chemotherapy, which was completely successful in 2004, but the inevitability of the tumour's return was something we lived with over the next few years. And sadly it struck at Christmas 2006, and by 2007 March she died. I wrote a book about this, the trials and tribulations of the whole enterprise, being a journalist. It's called We Bought a Zoo. It raised a lot of money, had a very good agent. All that money was spent straight away, went back into the ground, into the zoo, and we moved on. One day I got a call from a lady with an American accent saying, "Gee, Benjamin, I read your book. I think it'd make a great film." And I'm, yeah, well, that's great, thank you very much. She says, "I'm calling from 20th Century Fox." I'm like, okay, I'm suddenly really interested in everything you say. And she said to me, "Don't get your hopes up. 1 in 10 of these projects gets made." But she was going to root for it. And over the next 2 years, I got increasingly surreal phone calls from Julie Yorn, the producer of Fox, saying things like, whilst I was delivering vegetables, I was collecting pastures sell-by vegetables from Sainsbury's in Plymouth, being shouted at for not having a high-vis jacket on in the loading area. And I got this call from Julie saying, "Gee, Benjamin, we need you to decide which A-lister you want to play you. Is it going to be Leonardo DiCaprio or Tom Hanks?" And I said, "Well, hang on. Let's have a proper conversation about this." I waited 2 weeks and asked all my friends if they could come up with some better suggestions, including Hugh Grant, which I wasn't sure how to take that. And nobody suggested Sean Connery, I couldn't believe. But Matt Damon was suggested, and I kind of threw that back to Julie, thinking that'll shut her up. And she phoned back a bit later and said, "Yeah, Matt says yeah." Like, what? So they reproduced the zoo in Hollywood. There's our enclosure next to their enclosure. And they invited us out to the sets to enjoy this, which was incredibly surreal, to go from poverty and mud in rainy Devon to the incredible amount of money being spent on making a version of our zoo. I stood by the Tiger House there in the picture with Cameron Crowe and Matt Damon, and it was just like being in Devon, except that there were a lot of cameras around and the sun was shining. I was lucky enough to see some of the key moments of the film being filmed. But I knew I had to get away from there with a symbol of this event that was going to happen, to explain to the banks that it was worth not foreclosing on us at this point, because at the end of the tunnel there was indeed light. And so during a photo shoot with Matt Damon, I asked him if he would kindly wear one of our staff T-shirts for a publicity picture. And his advisors immediately stepped in and said, "No, Mr. Damon, I don't think this is a very good idea." And he stepped forward and said, "Yes, I will do that, but I'm busy for now, I'll come back at the end of the day." During that photo shoot, I felt a hand on my arm, and it was Matt Damon saying, "Should we go and do those pictures now?" And immediately, like, the call went out with a megaphone, "Mr. Damon needs the T-shirt, Mr. Damon needs the T-shirt," which arrived like on a silver platter. And there he is, being extremely nice and helping me raise the profile of Dartmoor Zoo. The next slide shows another random emergency, the sort of thing that happens all the time, kind of. This was in January last year, heavy snow, 10 o'clock in the morning. We'd broken the ice on the moat to let the tigers out, because if you have a frozen moat, they can obviously walk out and start playing on Dartmoor, which we don't want. So we just broken the ice, we just given the all clear to open the door for the tigers, and there was a big crack as this branch fell down and made a perfect bridge across the 5-metre fence into the enclosure. So at which point it's like, "Please put the tigers back in right now." And I spent 2 days up a stepladder with a chainsaw, really very cold indeed, fixing that. And the final picture, because this has to be a speed run through the talk, is a snap of some baby meerkats, just because we can show you that. And everybody likes meerkats. And we're actually Unfortunately, it's something I can't talk to you too much about, but watch this space for something extremely exciting in healthcare and meerkats coming your way soon. There's a quick run-through of my story. The messages for most audiences are based in overcoming adversity and keeping a team together, and the essence of it really from all of the tribulations I found is that a calmly led team with a very clear goal that's well motivated can achieve more or less anything. And with that note, I can say thank you very much for listening to me.